Board of Education special meeting to order. And we are now live and recording, and we will search out our last board member who might be in a waiting room. So let's just give it a minute to see. There's Gretchen. All right. Okay. So has everyone had a chance to review the agenda?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
All right, thanks, Mandy, for making the motion. Glenn for seconding. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Raise your hands. Thank you. Any opposed? Okay. Comments from the public. Just as I always say, if there are public comments, that the Board of Ed will listen. We do not directly engage, provide follow-up as appropriate. And each public comment is limited to around 2 minutes and 15 minutes to one topic. So Lucille, are there any public comments?
Yes, there is one.
I'm sorry?
Yes, there is one.
One. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Yes, go
To the
ahead.
Wilton Board of Education, I am a math teacher at Wilton High School. I am respectfully asking the district to rethink bringing students back to school next Wednesday. The teachers, schools, and district are simply not ready. There are virtually no safety protocols in the school, no signage, no sanitizer, ineffective masks. Writing this to share some thoughts about what I have observed since coming back to school. I can tell you this was very disturbing for most teachers at the high school. Most teachers have not had enough time to train on Schoology. We have been asked to populate the first units of each class, which may be 3 or 4 different courses. We have had no training on how to physically navigate teaching live and virtually simultaneously. I'm sorry. There were just cameras in our rooms with no instructions. I believe that we are being asked to train our students on Schoology next Wednesday, but we ourselves do not know how to use it. I also do not believe there is any plan to show our students how to navigate around the building with social distancing protocols, which should be done before classes begin. We are not ready. The stress and anxiety that this is causing for teachers is palpable. Is this really who we are? Sincerely, Peggy Muro, 220 Thunder Lake Road.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that comment. We will be addressing reopening. And again, we don't engage directly, but please know that all those concerns are serious and we hear you. And during the reopening update, I think we will, well, I'm hoping that we'll get to address some of the issues. Are there any more public comments, Lucille?
No, there are not.
Okay. Have people had a chance to read the consent, or I'm sorry, review the consent agenda?
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Yep.
Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
All right. Thanks, Gretchen. Thanks, Glenn, for seconding. All in favor of the consent agenda, approving it? Yes.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Consent agenda is approved. All right, this brings us to the bulk of our meeting tonight. Well, there are several issues that will be addressed tonight. We usually like to aim for around 9 o'clock at the latest to end. I do not mean to cut off anybody's conversation tonight, but I will also be keeping an eye on the clock. Everyone's incredibly busy with long days that are long enough. So every once in a while, if I need to move it along, I will. All right, so let's just jump in. I only had a couple of comments and I will even shorten those. I want to welcome anyone who's listening. This is the last special meeting before we begin our normal regular calendar. Next week, if at all possible, we will be meeting in person and then follow our regular meeting schedule from there. We do want to welcome back our teachers. We understand there are concerns and trepidations and anxiety and even disagreements. We will try to hear those and listen to the principals and the administration. But we do, as a board, want to thank the teachers for your hard work and your commitment, unfailing, to our kids. We're also going to be talking about sports tonight. And there'll be, for anybody who's listening and expecting any kind of decision, that is not going to happen. But we will sort of get an update on where SEAC is and hear some thoughts about that. I also need to just make another plea that all the community members and leaders are doing, which is please everyone follow all the protocols for safety, for health and safety. Our being able to open school in any form of in-person learning depends on low community transmission. So anything outside of school, where any activities such as any kind of sports, any kind of travel, please pay attention to the guidelines and the Connecticut advisory travel restrictions and all of those. If you need to quarantine. If you're playing any kind of sports, all the protocols of safety that are in place absolutely must be maintained. Again, any kind of in-person learning depends on low community transmission. Okay, so Kevin, that's my reopening, just reminders. So can you take us through? There's lots to go through, so thank you.
There is, and first, good evening, and thank you. I had prepared a presentation this evening, and I'm going to reverse the order because I've come to a conclusion in the last probably 2 hours that I need to share with you. So my original plan was just to walk you through first some technical reopening details, the return to school results, survey results, enrollment update, et cetera. And then I wanted to talk about some of the human questions and human concerns. But I'd like to flip that because I've come to a conclusion, and I think that's something we need to talk about first. My proposal is that and I apologize for the 11th hour, and for some of you this is going to sound like a shock because you've had no forewarning. But I've been spending, as you know, I was out at a family funeral today, and so when I got back, I was just kind of reading the communication and touching base with people, and really got a good, clear picture of what has been working well and what hasn't been working well in the last couple of days. And what became evidently clear is that, first with the tropical storm that blew through here, we really did lose about a week's worth of time with our professional learning and preparation. And we were hoping to be able to manage that effectively, but it became very obvious today that, coupled with some other issues that were outside of our control. Schoology, for example, was experiencing outages, which threw off many of our plans. So we're behind. It's a significant setback, and we have to be ready. And I'm not reacting or responding specifically to Peg's letter, but she's expressing the sentiment of many, and she's right. And so my proposal is that we cancel the 2 orientation days that are planned for next week, and we give that time back to our teachers and administrators so they can do further planning. They can finish the Schoology training to at least, get their feet underneath them. They can finish the technology hardware training, which is so critical to our plans. And then we fold those orientations into the first days of school. I think that's absolutely what we need to do. I know it's kind of hearing it is a shock for many. I also recognize that for our parents and our families, this may be a further setback, but from an instructional, educational point of view, we have to take the time that we need to make sure that we can be as ready as possible. I don't see any benefit to pushing out the start date beyond the 31st. We don't really gain anything from that because the weather is good, the transmission rates are low. To add additional, fully dedicated teacher professional learning time for all of our staff is really cost prohibitive at this point, given all of our other expenditures. So that's not my recommendation. But I think taking the time that's available to us next week, making the alteration with the orientation days will give us another, couple handfuls of hours to do some further training. This is news, I think, probably for most of the administrators, certainly for board members. So let me just pause there for a second. We'll take some questions, and I'm also going to ask, my folks here on the call who've been working with teachers and, dealing with these setbacks this week to weigh in if necessary.
Yeah.
Hey,
Kevin,
oh, go ahead, Glenn. Well,
Kevin, I don't disagree. Okay.
You go, Glenn, you go.
All right.
All right,
Kevin,
Glenn, go ahead.
I don't disagree at all. I think you're absolutely on target with this. Yeah, I raised the question a few meetings ago about the ability of Schoology to keep up with what was going to be an incredible demand on them and their system. So obviously they're struggling. They're having issues. It sounds to me that if we're not ready, we're not ready, and it's no one's fault. We lost 8 days or 7 days without power, to the storm. It's the right call, and I support you 100% in doing this. I really do.
Okay, thank you. Mandy?
No, I just was going to agree. I support you. I don't even think we need that much discussion. I mean, just by you saying that the teachers aren't feeling ready, I think that first and foremost, we want the schools to be ready and the teachers to be ready. I'm just curious what, will this be enough? And what specifically, is it like a safety? Is it Schoology? We just heard the letter that there's not the correct signage. So I just wanted clarification on, is this enough? Will we be ready on Monday? And what specifically do we have to do just to clear that air?
I think, there are a couple of things underway, and with, some of the other questions and concerns about the signage and the, the availability of hand sanitizer and things like that. I had set the target date for the day that students were arriving, and that, may have been a miscalculation on my part. I probably should have been thinking for the first day of teachers. In reality, given the pipeline delays that we've had, I don't know that would have been achievable, even if that was our goal. But, with some of those processes in place, we did the PPE order that we had placed that arrived earlier this week. Jose Figueroa had distributed, and the principals can speak to it because they were in the buildings, had distributed hand sanitizer, masks. The custodians were in the process of installing all of those tools. I think with respect to the signage, the update I received tonight was Cider Mill was about 95% complete. They were going to finish Cider Mill in the morning and then move on to Middlebrook, where they were going to be working over the weekend, with the goal to be done by Monday, Tuesday, which would have been in advance of students returning.
So you feel confident that this is enough, that we don't have to delay further? Because I know a lot of schools are delaying even more. I'm just curious your thoughts on that.
We delay further, honestly. I think, if you asked our teachers, and rightly, they would tell you they could use another week. I think all teachers in America would say that. I think I'm looking at what we can do. And I think what we can do is push the orientation days. I don't know what we get by moving the start date, and the issue is, so say we just decide, all right, we're not going to start on the 31st, we're going to start on the 1st, and we push everything out a day. So now we have a day that's vacant, but then if we're going to ask staff to work that day, we have to pay their salaries. And, when we ran the calculation for what we're, wanting to have all of them do, it's another significant expense. And I just think it's cost prohibitive. So what I'd like to do is, just maximize the time that we have, get as much done, between tomorrow and next Friday. And, help our staff, working through our building administrators and our Tech ILs, our LLC staff, to really help people focus in on, what are the fundamental pieces we need in place to bring kids back on the 31st. And so for me, we've got to get everybody, squared away with Schoology. That's the first thing, because that's such a big part of our strategy in managing our kids at home and kids in school. We do have, I think at this point, most of the equipment to set up our hybrid classrooms, although it sounds like we don't have it all yet. And so, some of it is a little bit complex. So teachers need some time and support to get a little bit of experience with it. From my general sense, and I again, I'll rely on the building administrators because they've been working with teachers. I don't think that piece is going to require extensive training. But I also think, for some, again, you have to remember our staff, we just have an incredibly dedicated professional group of people who want to have every single thing in place right, because that's their expectation and they want to have it right for kids. And so I think as part of what we need to do next week, as we're recalibrating a little bit, is we also need to try to simplify for them so they can simplify for our students when they come back. And again, kind of looking forward through September, we'll just capture as much as the professional learning and planning time we have to help, fill in the rest of the gaps.
So is your
So would
plan-
that be half day? So you're saying, just to be very clear for all the parents who are listening, the 31st would be a full day for cohort A, and the 3rd would be a full day for cohort B.
They'd be full days of school. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as far
Okay. Ruth, I'm sorry, I heard somebody.
it was-
Yeah, no, I think I wanted to also, like Mandy, to just clarify that the orientation days are not really being pushed back. They're just being taken off. And the 31st is the first full day for everybody. And it's an on-site day for cohort A. And it's, a remote day for cohort B, but it's a full day.
So, and we'll need to do the orientation work on those days. And so I think it's also, everyone needs to understand too, this is highly unusual for me because in every other situation, I would come to you with a fully vetted, fully thought out, fully baked plan that I had run through every administrator on this call, plus a whole bunch of others. And we didn't do that. So, our people, this is an 11th hour change. And now our building folks are going to have to scramble a little bit to work with the staff to reorganize those first days of school. And so we'll go back to, our favorite F word this year, flexibility. And just know that we're going to be relying on people to be, flexible as, again, we adjust. And I think this is this is how it's going to be. We're going to have to be making some adjustments as we learn new information and change.
Right. No, that's the key, to adapt, and we absolutely have to do whatever we can, in my viewpoint, to support our teachers to the maximum extent possible. We can't add calendar days. That's cost prohibitive. No district is doing that. But as much time as we can carve out between now and the first day of school to allow teachers to work, I think that's critical. Gretchen, did you want to say anything, or Jen?
I just had a couple questions about the physical buildings, and that if things are not 100% ready on Friday, are there ways that people can come in over the weekends? I mean, if there's signage that needs to be added or whatever it is. So as long as it's not I assume that the teachers can't come in, but it would be weekend work that could happen.
Yeah, and we have plans to do weekend work.
Oh, okay.
Right. Okay. Jen,
Yeah.
did you have any comments?
Just one question.
Sure.
If you're not ready, we're not ready, which is fine. My only question for next week then, and I know that building administrators need to kind of figure stuff out, but really cohort A goes Monday, Tuesday, we're all off Wednesday, cohort B goes Thursday, Friday. Kevin, is that kind of what you're envisioning?
That is, because that's the schedule we put out.
Right. So then are we somehow going to orient our cohort B kids on how to get online and figure out what's going on for the first couple days?
Well, it's a great question, Jen. And so I just, as I've been kind of mulling this, I'm going to meet with the administrators tomorrow, and I'm going to ask everybody, to take the next, I want you to give me 24 hours because I need it. Okay. And I'm going to come back with this group, and we're going to look at the calendar, because we have to, I cannot tell you right now, I can see the thought bubbles on all their heads as I'm looking at the Hollywood squares here, and they have a million questions of their own. I need this community and this board to give me 24 hours. So we know that cohort A is going to meet on Monday, so we'll commit to that. And then I will come back to you in 24 hours with the rest of the plan.
Okay, so we can't add any agenda items in terms of action items to a special meeting, but Kevin, you heard all the comments from the board members. We are supportive of doing whatever you deem necessary to schedule next week, so that we support teachers to the greatest extent possible. We will keep, as I understand it, keep August 31st as the first full day of school, with the cohort A for the first 2 days, Wednesday, the so-called normal Wednesdays, and then cohort B appears on site for the first time on Thursday and Friday. But normal school day hours, am I right?
We will have normal school day hours beginning the 31st.
Okay.
We need
And
to,
the planned schedule and somehow orientation will get baked in some way, shape, or form into the start of school week.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So thank you. And I know everybody's under a tremendous amount of pressure. So whatever it takes to get this right before our kids come for the first day, let's do whatever we can. So thank you.
Debbie?
Yeah.
I know Fran is on the call. I'd like to hear from Fran about Schoology and what her thoughts are regarding their ability to be fully supportive of our efforts. I'm greatly concerned, as I was weeks ago. About
yes, you're right. You did raise it, and let's hope that this is a glitch. But Fran, do you want to weigh in?
Sure. We had some intermittent outages today and some yesterday, which really hindered our training that was scheduled during that time. What we found out from the folks at Schoology is that there are, and we actually were part of this as well, there were a lot of bulk uploads happening. So as we changed schedules, as we were, making all those changes to everything, we were syncing major files over from PowerSchool into Schoology. And I would imagine across the country that was happening. I could tell you that today there was a major upload that we needed to change for Cider Mill for some of the scheduling that had to be corrected from PowerSchool to Schoology. The day before, we had similar issues with some of the courses not coming over and needing to be resynced for Miller Driscoll. And it wasn't just our schools. So if you multiply that out by the entire country, they basically said we had issues. They recognized it and they posted on their website when things were, back up. I sent something out to all staff about, what had happened and when it was back up. I think that as we go through this hybrid model, we have to just keep in mind that everybody is using all the same tools we are. That, just like we had Google went down and Gaggle went down and Padlet went down, we had a lot of these similar issues in the spring. We could anticipate that might happen again. In this particular case, we were already having issues, as Kevin was saying, with the fact that some of the curriculum units weren't completed due to the outages from the storm. So we had one thing on top of the other, and teachers that would have started bringing curriculum units into Schoology hadn't quite finished. So we had to provide time for that as well. So we were behind, and then we got even more behind, which is really became something that was an issue.
So Fran, I'm putting my mom hat on right now. First of all, so are we agreeing then, Kevin, just so that it's very clear, we are not starting school next week? I know we can't vote on it, but that's the movement forward.
Students will not be starting school next week.
Okay. And then second, I'm a little nervous. How are we going to keep this from happening throughout the school year if suddenly Schoology has hundreds or thousands of schools that are now implementing this? What's the chance of this happening consistently?
I think, I think it's important to remember, and I don't want to focus exclusively on Schoology because, we use lots of, software programs that, districts all across the country. And so,
right. So technology in general, like how are we feeling about?
We have, our teachers always have backup plans. And so, as they kind of plan accordingly, they'll have backup plans. But I don't think there is a foolproof way, to avoid, Schoology or PowerSchool or, any of the other myriad apps that we use experiencing, intermittent outages. I think, we'll continue to watch it. And, if, something went sideways with that particular vendor where they weren't able to keep up with demand, I think that would be a different set of circumstances. But, we took comfort in the fact that Schoology was acquired by PowerSchool somewhere in the last year. And so they have, far more infrastructure than they did previously.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Fran.
All right. Yes. Thank you. All right. Kevin, do you want to continue with the school reopening updates?
And I thank you. And I thank everybody for their support. And, I apologize again for the 11th hour audible here, and I apologize to our community, but I do feel very strongly that that's what's necessary to make sure that we're successful when we bring students back. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to just walk you through just some of the technical concerns and questions that we had. So you're looking at just a summary slide of our survey results, and you can see from the total set of respondents that we had, and it looked like we had probably just about, I would say 70-75% of our families respond. The overwhelming majority at each grade had opted for the in-person hybrid learning program. And you can see, depending on the grade level, about a, class or two, give or take, worth of students have opted, in each grade level for the full remote learning model. And so this data is helpful because, we had it, we gave it right to the principals, and they've been busy scheduling students into classes now. Similarly, you can see we had about a 2/3, 1/3 split here with the students who, and the families rather, who opted to drive versus the students that will be riding the bus. We sent out in our communication yesterday the transportation plan, and so for families that didn't have a chance to read that, we will be running our bus routes. Given the numbers we have, we do think we can adequately provide for social distancing on the buses, as for each of those routes. So we're feeling good about that. Just another breakdown of students. And then, responses by grade level. So just same data. I'll send this all to you so you can look at it more carefully if you like.
So Kevin, you said 75% responded. For the 25% that didn't, how are we handling that?
Well, they're coming in. And so, we're managing, we kept the survey open for a little bit longer, and then we've had people emailing us. I don't know, and I don't think we should expect to get 100% response rate. But I think, in all of our schools and the way we've configured classrooms, we're expecting to be able to manage students and families that we didn't hear from, whether they're remote.
Okay.
Person.
Got
So
it.
you counted all the non-respondents as participating in
Hybrid.
the hybrid model?
That's right.
Okay, all right. And did you have a sort of a percentage district-wide? Is it about 10%, 12%, 50? What is it?
When I looked at it last, and I couldn't get my hands on it tonight. I just didn't.
Sure.
But at the last I looked at it, and I'd been checking it, daily across the week. It was at about 90-10, and a little less than 10 for the remote option. And the way the numbers shake out, that's about what it looks like, district-wide.
Okay, and it looks like some grade levels were more than 10%,
Yes.
and a few were under. Okay.
Of course, this is, the breakdown for respondents.
Yeah, got it. Okay. Oh, I see. Got it. Okay.
And so I wanted to just put the board with an enrollment update as of today. And so I'll walk you through kind of the bottom line here. And so we're about 21 over projected in kindergarten. So we needed to hire that extra teacher. We're 4 under projecting at first grade, which is, it's interesting because this breaks the pattern here. I do have some theories about this, but this breaks that normally we pick up 15, 20 kids in first grade annually. Similarly, we're 5 under in projection in second grade. I think these are COVID related. 9 over projection in grade 3, 2 under projection, so we're right on in grade 4 right now. Grade 5 is within 1. 7 over projected in grade 6, 1 in grade 7, 1 under in grade 8, and then 4 over in grade 9, 12 over in grade 10, 5 over in grade 11, and 4 under in grade 12.
Do you think the 12 over in grade 10 is a reflection on people staying in the system and not going off to private school?
I think it's too soon to tell. I have all withdrawal information, and I just started to tabulate it. And so it's a little too early for me to conjecture, but I will say, we know that, the housing market has been on fire. And so we've been selling houses all over the community, which is great. And so some of the, the addition is certainly a result of new families coming into town. We've been getting.
Okay. Yeah.
But we also had, I was just started to look at it. Started yesterday, and then again just a little bit ago. We do have a fair number of families that moved
Yeah.
out of state, moved out of town, and so I think that is captured here in some of the changes in the numbers. And then we do have, particularly at the lower schools, it looked like we had a small number of families opting for homeschool, and I hadn't really seen that in, I think I counted 7 or 8. Normally, in normal circumstances, we get maybe 2 or 3, withdrawals with the intent to homeschool notifications. So we have more this year. It looks like we also have a handful of our parents with younger kids opting to delay the start of school. So I think that's influencing some of the numbers. It could be influencing some of the numbers at first grade. And then we have, there were a handful of kids who had withdrawn to attend boarding school. And then, we typically have kids that come out and attend a private school. And it's a mix.
All in all, Ellen's estimates were pretty right up, pretty close. All in all.
Are, and Lucille informed me just before we started that that these numbers are they're changing daily, and so
Sure.
we track now every single day, and we'll obviously we won't lock in until October 1.
Kevin, are the pending registrations, are those in your numbers?
I believe they are, yes. So you look at the total, the pending is included.
Okay, because we're not going to expect 8 more kindergartners, right?
No, that's in the total here.
Okay. All right, great.
Great. Okay, so enrollment. And I'll keep the board updated on the pattern as we move forward here over the next couple of weeks.
Kevin, just a note, you're not in presentation mode, just so you know, if you want to click over to presentation mode.
Thank you. Oh, you know what? I kept it out of presentation because it messes up my screens.
Oh, okay, no worries, just so you know.
Yeah, I will close this. So yeah, hopefully that's a little bit better. Yeah, I had that issue the other day. I had 3 screens in front of me and I couldn't find anything when I was presenting. All right, so a couple of other just updates. So we're working on childcare, and we'll have the typical wraparound services in place. Dolores Tafariallo and our continuing ed program handles that. So on those days when kids are in session in class, they'll have to the before and after school care. We're working on trying to locate an off-site location for the alternating days. So we know that we have a handful of families as well as a handful of teachers looking for childcare on those days. And so having lots of conversations, it made sense to try to find an off-site location. Right now, we're working with the Y. Maria informed me a little bit ago that we do have some barriers right now with the Y. So we'll kind of work through that over the next day and try to, nail down these plans just as soon as we can. So we have good programs for people who require childcare. Dolores shared the numbers, and they were relatively low. So at Miller Driscoll, we were looking at, about 15 kids per day on those alternate days. And then at Cider Mill, the numbers were substantially lower. I think the high was 7 on one day and maybe, between 2 and 5 on the other days. But like I said, we'll continue to work with our community partners to make sure that there is a program in place.
And Kevin, this is for teacher and administrative childcare or for families childcare before after school? Okay, got it.
Yeah. And then I shared with you earlier this week the email that Chris Burney forwarded. I was going to have Chris provide a full presentation tonight on the commissioning agent's report, but he only has reports for 3 of the 4 schools. And so we just decided it'd be better to do it all. So I believe when we meet next week, Chris will have all 4 reports and he can take us through all of the details about the commissioning agent's findings and recommendations. As you saw in that email, the news was very, very good. The commissioning agent, as he wrote, was very impressed with the work that Mark Esposito and his colleagues do and have done maintaining our systems. He said, compared to some other school systems that he works in, ours were just in terrific conditions. So that's really good news.
That is good news, because that is a major concern. Airflow, air quality is that's great.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah, that is great news. We got many emails, sort of questions about that. And it got sort of buried in the state, the plan that you submitted to the state. So thank you for highlighting it, that we're not only on top of it, but we're doing really well. So that's great news. Thank you.
Sure. And so just a couple of the high points here. So people understand what's happening with our HVAC systems. We are complying with the CDC and the DPH guidance to maximize the effectiveness and performance of those systems. As you know, we did retain a commissioning agent to come in and take a look and give us feedback on all of them. Some of the steps we had already been taking along the way were to upgrade the filters. The filters have a MERV rating. I think we're using the MERV 13s, which are the recommended filters. And then the second recommendation was to increase and maximize fresh air flow through the classrooms. So Mark, in taking the guidance and recommendations from the commissioning agent, has done that and is doing that. And he'll monitor those systems to ensure fresh air flow through all of our classrooms. And then we updated and increased the cycle of filter change as well. So where I think we had done that twice a year, now we'll be doing it at least 3 times a year. But as you heard, our schools are in very good shape.
Kevin, quick question on childcare. On Wednesday, when everyone's remote, are the teachers expected to be teaching from their classrooms, or can they teach from their homes?
We're going to give teachers the option of teaching from home or from their classrooms. Great. Another series of questions that came up were around school bus transportation. And so there was a fairly lengthy set of bullet points that went out in last night's communication on transportation. And so I just wanted to select some of the most pertinent and share that information tonight for all of you and for those that are listening at home. First and foremost, all of our buses will run on their normal established routes. Assignments will be viewable in each family's Power School account beginning August 19th for Miller Driscoll and Cider Mill, and then the 24th for Middlebrook and the high school. Per the recommendations, weather permitting, we will keep windows open to increase the circulation of airflow on the school buses. Drivers will be wearing masks and following all of the self-monitoring protocols that are both consistent with CDC and what we're asking all of our staff and families to do as well. The drivers working with STA have set up a pretty aggressive cleaning regimen for those buses. So each day between the routes, after Cider Mill and then again after the high school, middle school, they'll be sanitizing all of the high touch surfaces on the bus. And then after the AM and PM runs, cleaning and sanitizing all of the high touch, the hard surfaces, and the seats. So buses will be thoroughly cleaned at least twice a day. Students, as you know, will be required to wear masks on the bus. We're asking students to bring masks from home, but in the event that they forget a mask or don't have one, we'll have a supply of masks on all of our buses, and they can be provided by the driver. And then if we have a compliance problem with students wearing masks, and I'm not talking about kids that might have legitimate reasons for not wearing masks. I'm talking about, kids that, are refusal. We're going to have to work with the family on transportation. All right, so we talked a little bit about signage. So these are some examples of, what you'll find in our schools. All of the signage, I believe, is completed at Miller Driscoll. We're nearly complete at Cider Mill, and then tomorrow we'll get going on the middle school, and then hopefully by Sunday we'll be in the high school and have that done. But all over the schools you'll see the kind of keep 6 feet apart, stand here, stickers, reminders everywhere. We have in some cases segregated staircases, so we'll have up and down staircases. There'll be chevrons and lines in the hallways reminding students to keep to the right. Um, I'm going to ask Kathy, because her school was done first, if she's here. Kathy, are you still here?
Yep, I'm here.
Hey, would you mind, sorry to put you on the spot.
Okay.
Miller, would you just give us kind of a 2-minute overview of, the signage and what it looks like at Miller Driscoll?
Oh, sure. First off, it's absolutely adorable. So they put on entrance and exit signs on all of the outside doors. So it kind of goes with the flow of traffic. The green arrows and the yellow arrows are on the floor. So kids know, again, like in a traffic pattern, which way they're walking and to stay on that side of the door. The wear your mask and keep your distance and sanitize your hands and all of those are all both in the bathrooms and then in the hallways. And then what they did was put huge occupancy signs on the restrooms. And when the kids come, now it won't be on orientation day, but when they come on one of those first days, there are also the little footprints that you can see on the stand here. So it shows them both inside the restroom and then outside the restroom where they can wait. And I have to say, one of the kindergarten social stories was titled "Don't Wait Till It's Too Late," because we're going to teach the kids to, don't wait until you really have to go to the potty right that very second, because you might have to stand on the dot and just wait for a little bit. But it looks absolutely beautiful. They did a great job. So we're really lucky that, for the most part, I think ours is pretty much done. We also there's polka dots all over around the bus loop and things like that. So it looks amazing and it's very kid friendly.
I have to say, as a mom who watched those videos, my daughter even noticed that the chevron arrows looked like they were 6 feet apart from each other, so that as you're walking, you know not to get too close to your classmate in front of you.
Yep.
And she loved the knock on the bathroom door. If you hear 2, wait till you hear 1.
Yep. Yep.
And being a germ buster and all those things, it was a big hit.
Yeah. The teachers did an amazing job on the social stories and all of that. Each grade level did their own. And, the kids used to do Frogger on like the white tiles and the gray tiles. And now these chevrons, it's just a whole new game of Frogger we're going to have right now. So it's going to be great.
Great. Thank you. And since I wrote this slide 3 days ago, we don't need it anymore. So we'll skip that. And so the last thing, and we talked about some of the technical issues and the technical concerns. We just walked through a handful of some of them, and then some of the human concerns. The idea of shared commitments is one that we all need to reinforce with our students. When I got in this afternoon, Lucille had shared with me that I think First Select Woman in Vanderslice had sent a picture that was sent to her of a group of soccer players that were would be out over in Allens or someplace today. I think it was today, I'm not sure. But my understanding is they were kind of shoulder to shoulder. They weren't wearing masks. And I understand they may have been coming off the practice field or something, but what I'm saying to everybody, and I think we all need to repeat this message, our goal is not to get to the first day of school. Our goal is to get to the last day of school. And we all know, we've heard lots of stories and gotten lots of emails from our kids over the last 6 months. We know from hearing from our teachers, we certainly know from hearing from our parents, that in-person learning is preferable for just about everybody than remote learning. And the only way we're going to be able to stay in person is if all of us do our job and practice all of these mitigation strategies. So we're going to be working with our students, but I'm asking, if students are on this call listening, they need to take this seriously. And we're seeing, lots of examples now from our colleges and universities across the country where they're not. And that's a terrible, terrible example. So we're going to be asking all of our young people in this town to do the right thing. And we're going to ask their families to really reinforce that. It matters. The stakes are high. The stakes are high for our staff, and we just can't say it enough. And so, Debbie, I appreciate you starting the conversation that way. I want to end it that way, and we need to repeat it ad nauseum. I do know, from some of our Park and Rec friends, and certainly our health director, they're feeling exasperated right now because they keep having to correct behavior. And we're in this, we've been in this now for many months. We got a long way to go, and people need to do their jobs. They need to behave, and they need to follow these social commitments, because it's the only way we're going to be able to get to school and stay in school. And so I will be reinforcing that message repeatedly with our staff, with our families, with my own children, and with all of their friends and all of their friends' friends. I'm going to just stop there.
Okay, any questions, comments? Thank you, Kevin. Any questions or comments, other than, of course, to keep reiterating the message that the mitigation strategies are what the schools can do during the school day, but the community transmission rates, that really depends equally, if not more so, on out-of-school activities. Just keeping it low, because otherwise we cannot do in-person learning. So anyway, so thank you for that, quick but also comprehensive overview. Any questions, board members? I know that you might have had some along the way, so please.
I had a quick question regarding
Gretchen, yeah.
Regarding the enrollment right now. I think Kevin, you'd mentioned you were going to share the document, but that the enrollment numbers are changing daily. Is that something you're sharing just with us, or is that going to be out there with like a 8/20 date as of, here's the snapshot of today?
The information's public, so there's no reason not to share it. I think what we're going to be seeing, Gretchen, I expect anyway, is changes on the margins. So we might see 1 or 2, 3 kid add or drop across grade levels, or individual grade levels. So and that's common at this point. The only, I guess I'm still waiting to see, as I've been tracking home sales. I was on a call with the Fairfield County Realtors, yesterday. I don't know when it was, yesterday or Tuesday. Every day is Wednesday in my mind. So I think it was yesterday afternoon. Sorry. But one of the realtors had said, commonly home buyers shoot for closing in July, August in anticipation of a school year. But it looks like, they're also anticipating a very strong September. So I suspect what could happen is as we get closer to the school, those folks that had moved now will be out of the system. Those folks that had opted for, homeschooling or maybe a private school will be off the rolls. So if we're still closing, having robust numbers of closings, I guess we could still see an uptick in our student enrollment as we come in through September.
Yeah, I was just thinking if it's out there, and people might argue the point of, who knows? I mean, it's, I just wanted to make sure that it was clear that that was as of today.
Yes. That, I don't know. Lucille prepared it, so some point today.
Kevin, do we have enough flexibility in terms of class sizes if we were to grow a bit more, or are we on the edge? Or I guess that's probably too general a question to ask. It's probably grade level by grade level.
It is. And I think too, certainly starting in a hybrid, gives us a little bit more space. But I think we'll have to, especially as we're, starting the year and looking at, we have the goal of bringing all kids in. We may find ourselves, I think I hesitate to give you a firm answer now, but we may find ourselves where we might need to hire additional staff.
Okay.
Yeah. I think, we did add that kindergarten teacher, which we needed, but that at this point, that was the only mission critical position for enrollment. But I can, I'll continue to look at the numbers, and if I see anything.
Yeah. We'll have to track them, closely. Thank you.
Yeah. Just the last piece, I'm going to just share my screen quickly for all of you and for, folks that are watching, just so you can just remind people where to get information. So as people are looking for information, we're obviously going to be continuing to send out district communications. We'll send, especially in light of the change with the orientation days, we'll send a communication out tomorrow. The schools will be continuing to communicate, but we did develop this reopening page. So if you go to the splash page for the website, you'll see the highlighted yellow button called 2021 School Reopening Page. And then here, we've been populating it with the information. So we have all of the updates in communication, COVID-19 resources, information from the Board of Education, transportation calendar. You can read it for yourself. So I want to call your attention. And then all of the district and school specific plans are here. And then the frequently asked question document that we created and will continue to update is here as well. And then if people want to provide input or have questions, the email is posted. So it's a resource that we want to remind people that exists.
So that's the infamous yellow button.
That's the yellow button.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great page. The only suggestion I have is if it's possible to make it bigger on the page, because sometimes when you go to the website, you see the pictures and you don't see the choices. So if there's any way to highlight it even more, because it's critical at this point to have a one-stop for information.
I have a page that like zooms in and tells me that I need to go to the yellow page. Like it, it's a pop-up that comes in. And
yeah, there is a pop-up thing, but then, if the picture of the kids at Middlebrook or the high school or whatever take over, you have to know to scroll down to find anything, and it sometimes gets a little bit lost.
Great. So our terrific webmaster, Mr. Skip, I will ask him if he can enlarge the button. He may be.
Well, it's just with everything changing so fast, we really need one-stop shopping. And that is a terrific page to have. So I appreciate the work behind it. So thank you.
I have one question kind of related to the website, but also related to the high school. They had a freshman orientation today on Zoom, and there was a lot of difficulty getting logged on. I actually blamed it on my daughter, but apparently there was a problem overall. And I think some kids were never able to log on. Is that something that can be recorded and put onto the website, or will there be another chance to have that? I guess I'm asking maybe either Don or Bob about that. If there's a way that they can redo the orientation for those who missed it, or at least post it on that website where that reopening page was.
Yeah, we are aware that there was some technological difficulties. So we're aware of that. I actually had a couple of kids email me. So we will work out a plan to make sure everybody gets the same orientation. I think that, delaying the school year by a couple of days will take a little bit of pressure off of people and kids. And I would also say that, just to reassure you, we do have some good orientation activities planned for what would have been those first 2 half days. I won't disclose them because we were working on today with the kids. So we will find a way to ensure that it's a level playing ground for the kids who missed the orientation. We want our freshmen to be ready, to feel comfortable, to be able to acclimate, and we will communicate about that.
Okay, great. Yeah, my daughter did get on, but I did find out later that there were a whole bunch of people that didn't. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody who missed it will know that there's another chance for them.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. Kevin, any more on the updates?
I think we'll pause there with the updates, and we'll provide another round when we meet again next Thursday.
Okay, I want to give a thank you to all the staff who are working on the sort of virtual welcomes and meet and greets. We got a little sample from Jen Falcone, and I'm sure it's goes beyond cider mill, but just the creativity and the thought and the attitude of the teacher welcomes, even though they're virtual, very warm and engaging. So thanks to everyone for getting to all the staff members who got that together fairly quickly. It was very heartening. And one teacher said, "Are you ready to learn? Are you ready to let your brains grow in ways they've never grown before?" So I like that sort of brain growing. So that's what this year is about. So anyway, so thanks to all the teachers out there once again.
And I want to also just add my thanks, because my kids had their, meet the teacher today, and it really was, wonderful for them, and their experiences were all great and positive. Now that they're not having the orientation next week, with the little ones especially, I think it might be important if we have something that helps them kind of, especially for the cohort B that's going to be home for 3 days, having not been on a computer all day or experienced that before. Maybe if there's just like a little something or like a tutorial of some order, just so those first 3 days are not kind of like I don't want to say a loss for them, but too overwhelming for them.
All right, good point. Let's give Kevin the 24 hours to come up with a miracle plan.
You can have 48.
Well, we'll take 24 if he's offering it. All right, so thank you. Yet another challenge, but thank you. All right, well, speaking of challenges, are we going to move and talk about athletics?
We are. So
Okay, Chris McDougall, is your hair on fire?
I'm sure it is.
Yeah, that's an understatement.
I know.
Yeah. So I thought what we'd do, we're still waiting. The CDC and the DPH, I believe, were meeting this evening, and we don't have, at least not that I've seen, an outcome or a resolution, but I do have a recommendation for the board, and I thought we'll just retrace a couple of steps because athletics has been an odyssey. And Chris, you'll just help me with the timeline here if I get things out of sequence. So in somewhere, I think late July, the CIAC put forth a restart plan for athletics, which called really for a kind of a phased in approach for all fall sports where kids would return about now to do a number of weeks of conditioning, and then they would slowly kind of make their way into full practices and then scrimmages and games.
Right.
The football committee, the CIAC football committee had a couple of weeks ago come forward with a recommendation that football be moved to the spring. They were concerned about just the rigorous nature of the sport and the contact that the kids were going to have on the field. And so that was the recommendation. The CIAC Board of Control contemplated that recommendation, but ultimately rejected it. And they voted, I think this was last Wednesday, Chris?
Yes.
They voted to go forward with their original plan. The following day, the Department of Public Health issued guidance and recommendation to the CIAC, which said a number of things. Notably, it recommended that they should take a cautious approach to athletics, that they should postpone the start of all athletic activities until 2 weeks after the reopening of schools, in-person schooling, that they take that additional time to provide further training to coaches, players, and families on all of the various mitigation strategies that our teams would be using to prevent the spread of the virus, that they limit games and travel, that they limit locker room use, and then that they allow the lower risk and the moderate risk sports to go forward if schools and districts could, effectively implement all of the mitigation strategies. They also recommended that districts either postpone to the spring or cancel outright the high-risk activities, athletic activities, which are girls volleyball and football. So that recommendation came after the CIAC Board of Control had voted. It obviously caused an uproar. The CIAC has since kind of communicated with the DPH looking for some further guidance and clarification. They were supposed to meet. I don't know what the outcome of that is. As I have been watching this sports saga, my recommendation to this board and to our community is that regardless of where the dust settles, we need to follow the Department of Public Health guidance. We've been following their guidance in just about every other arena. I can't imagine why we would depart from the DPH guidance for athletics. And so whatever that guidance is, I think, it should be Wilton's policy to follow it.
Right. Tomorrow after tonight's meeting, which I believe they're still meeting because I've been watching Twitter since this meeting started, just in case something came out. The CIAC Board of Control is going to meet again tomorrow. And then after that, then an announcement will be made.
So Kevin, do you mean the Wilton Department of Public Health or do you mean the Connecticut Department of Public Health?
Connecticut Department of Public Health. And of course, our Barry Bogle, our local health director, would have to approve all of our, return to sport plans.
Chris, can you help me understand, in light of what Kevin said and the fact that we've based all our plans and our goals on putting health and safety first, what is the issue between SEAC and the DPH? Once DPH came out, and I admit their timing, might have been late, or maybe SEAC was too early, I can't figure it out. But
Right.
Why are they on such different pages if everyone's concerned about health and safety?
Yeah, it's my understanding that the DPH changed their ruling. Earlier in the summer, in July, the DPH came out with a ruling saying now's the time to play. And that's why all our youth sports and town sports are playing right now, and they're still playing. Somewhere along the line, they changed it. And the CIC also, they were listening to their Connecticut state doctors, which I was always under the impression they were the same people, but they're different entities. So the CIC, in their meeting right now, they're asking the Department of Health to give them an understanding what metrics have changed, why did they change their rulings and policies. So, and some of the things in their letter that they wrote to us and their explanations, they left out field hockey, they left out, swimming is an indoor sport, yet they're still going to be swimming this fall. Volleyball is an indoor sport, and I think that's the only reason why they're suggesting them to move to the spring. So there's some holes in their letter, so the CIC is trying to ask them to fill their holes.
So Chris, where do we stand today for football and volleyball? Because I know those were the two main ones.
Today we're to use CIC's word, we are paused.
So they're not training, they're not starting, they're not doing anything right now.
Nothing. No, the only team that would have been doing reconditioning this week would be football, and everything's been put on hold. The teams that are out in the fields this week, they're camps put together by the booster clubs.
And I just want to clarify, I know that everyone on this call probably knows this, but this has nothing to do with town sports. It's amazing how many text messages and emails I get about, 7th, 5th, 4th grade town sports. This is completely separate just for the high school.
Right. Yeah, completely separate. You're right.
So there won't be any tryouts or anything happening until you've been given something on this go forward with sports in general.
Right. By tomorrow afternoon, we're expecting to hear something. And then, I'll meet with Kevin and we'll make a ruling on what we do next.
Okay. And so should we hear by the end of the day tomorrow or by next week, do you think? Assuming something by tonight or tomorrow morning.
Yeah, I'm hoping by tomorrow afternoon. So our league, the FCAC, we're meeting tomorrow at 1:00 with the understanding that we'll know something by then. So.
Okay, but
that's our hope.
But if we're following Department of Health, does it matter what SEAC says? That's where I'm confused. So
yeah, it's my understanding the CIC is going to follow the Department of Health too. That's why they're meeting right now, so everybody is on the same page.
Okay. All right. So Glenn, you were. Go ahead, Glenn.
Yeah, I think the likelihood then is that if we do follow the public health, we will not play football this fall, and I think we should not play football this fall. I think the risk is too great. We have, as a board in a district, our top priority has always been the health and safety of our students. It's always been number one on our list of goals and objectives. Playing football flies totally in the face of that as a priority. And I think we just, and I don't know if FCAC can say as a group and get together and come to their senses and say, no, it doesn't make sense to play football this fall. Let's postpone it until the spring. No one wants football more than I do. Okay? No one. But at what cost? It isn't worth the risk for our students, for their families, etc., to play a contact sport where you have 10 guys piling on top of it. I mean, it's ludicrous to even think that we would consider doing that in this environment. Anyway, I think we should, and to the extent we have any influence or input into FCAC, I think if we step up as a conference, the FCAC, and say, we're not doing it, guys. You guys can figure out what you want to do, but we are not going to endanger our students and their families playing football this fall. It just makes no sense whatsoever. Anyway, my 2 cents for what it's worth.
Well, Glenn, your 2 cents is worth a lot because you are such an avid football booster person with lots and lots of history in this community. So thank you for voicing that opinion and that viewpoint. Anyone else?
Debbie, the only thing I would say is I don't want to attack football. I think it's across the board for all sports, you know, hockey, volleyball. I don't want people to think we're attacking football. I think it's every sport has to be looked at for safety because that's paramount.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
and maybe you're right. I mean, and we need to look sport by sport by sport, no doubt about it. But football is the highest risk of all. It really is, and that's the one that I really have focused on. Swimming, cross country is very much an individual sport, and if done properly and done well, you have your social distancing, you have all those good things. There is no such thing as social distancing in football. Your objective is to hit the guy and get as close to him as you can and tackle him and pile on him. I mean, come on, guys. It's crazy to even think we could play football right now.
Yeah, but I think, and I'm hoping DPH and SEAC will A, agree, and B, put health and safety first, and C, go sport by sport, because they all have different degrees of contact and different parameters within their sport. So absolutely. So Kevin, unless there are further comments, and of course we do have some time, we're meeting again next week, so we'll have another update.
To the best of my understanding, hopefully, as Chris noted, tomorrow we'll have some new information, and as soon as I learn it, I'll share it with the board, and we'll have this as a follow-up agenda item.
Okay.
I would also just like to say that I like the idea to some extent of phasing in as well, the way we are doing everything else. I think it's really important that we get all our kids back in the classroom successfully first.
Right. And I think when you look at the letter from DPH, that was absolutely their message. Start academics, wait 2 weeks, start sports, and then it gets into the specifics specifics about the sports. So let's hope that SEAC and DPH can come out with a unified front. I think it would help everybody. And we got some very heartfelt letters, from boosters of a couple of different sports. And we totally understand the passion in the community for sports, what it does for the mental and social health of kids, on lots of different levels. So we're not diminishing that, and we're not taking it seriously, but we're trying to put it in the context of a global pandemic, and worrying about health and safety and trying to get our academic program in person as much as possible. All right, Chris or Kevin, was there anything else on sports at this point in time?
Not from me, no. Thank you.
Nope.
Okay, well, thank you both. All right, so the next agenda item is under possible action items, and this is additional FTE requests. I think the board got a sort of a draft of a description of the need, which was discussed at our last meeting. Kevin, do you want to, well, you know what, I am going to do a process thing here. There are several different recommendations, and rather than vote on them all at once, I would prefer, as a way to focus the conversation and also discuss the pros and cons or the merits or the need of each one separately, that we just go through them in order. So let's take the first one on the list, discuss it, and then if there's a motion, we'll take a motion, et cetera, and we'll go through them. I think that's just a way to focus and to be efficient. So Kevin, if you could take us through, and I can't believe I spent all meeting trying to make sure I didn't lose the list. But I think the first, well, you can set the stage for us, but then the first specific we will discuss would be the world language interim teacher at Middlebrook.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, just to kick off this conversation, it's my sense I've been bringing you all some bad news. And on the financial, positions represent another significant and unbudgeted cost to the district. If there's any silver lining at all, it's that we do anticipate some reimbursement from FEMA, and we would expect additional reimbursement from the state of Connecticut. So, second point, none of these positions, from my opinion, are nice to have positions. We manage our FTE very carefully, and as enrollment changes and scheduling changes, we make appropriate adjustments. We are always mindful of our budget and bottom line, but these positions are all need-based, and the building administrators put them together, and if they didn't feel very, very strongly that they needed to have them, then they wouldn't be asking for them, and I certainly wouldn't be asking for them. So the first on the list is the interim world language at Middlebrook, and as I wrote to you in that memo, fundamentally the school needs both this position as well as the 0.5 PE to run their schedule. What they're attempting to do is really be able to honor the social distance requirements and the cohorting plans that they've put in place. And fundamentally, without the additional world language position, Middlebrook would not be able to maintain a cohort grouping across 7th and 8th grades.
So Kevin, how does the cohort grouping, how's that maintained in strides?
So stride, Damien wrote in response to that question was, no stride courses are crossing outside their team. So, under normal circumstances, in stride, they would mix in teams. So right now they're managing them across their teams. In 7th and 8th grade, students would mix within the team to reorganize into stride cohorts. And then 6th grade students are staying in cohorts throughout the day. There are some other exceptions with small group courses that are, not the stride courses, but reading intervention, math intervention, and the like. Maria, do you want to add to that?
No, I mean, that's my understanding of it as well, based on, I know that they're making a number of different changes to the schedule, and I think there have been several iterations of it, so that's my understanding of it at this point as well.
Kevin, before we jump into this, can we back up 1 minute and talk about the FEMA money, or talk about what we've already approved, and maybe Anne can share a little bit about when we were supposed to find out if we were going to get any money back, and maybe why we haven't heard back yet?
Sure, of course. Anne, do you want to take those questions?
Sure. Well, to date, what we have approved, and some of it has been spent, is approximately $1.4 million. In that, we need to remember that includes the 7 custodians that was approved at the prior meeting, which was approximately over $400,000. So from an equipment standpoint position and what we were trying to do in licensing, it's about $950,000, taking out the payroll. So the position that we're in right now, we've submitted for about $245,000 to FEMA. We're waiting to hear back from FEMA. FEMA is, I would say, overloaded. They have people working from home just like the rest of us were doing it. The state has pushed out the deadline. I'll go back on the connection. The state has put the deadline out now from August 31st for filing to September 30th, because we can't file with the state until we get our notification from FEMA of what they're paying and what they're not. The guidelines that we're getting, because they're in conjunction, FEMA and the state are working together. So we have to apply for reimbursement quarterly. This is an order from the state. So we send it to FEMA quarterly. They send us a letter of what we're covering, what we're not. What they don't, we then turn around and put to the state along with the letter from FEMA. So they're quite behind for the state to actually have to push their deadline out because they know so many places around the country are still waiting for their letter. So that's where we are with FEMA. Now, I should go into the guidelines on FEMA is it's not, if we budgeted the expense, it's not typically eligible. It's anything that has not been budgeted. So all these items that we are coming up with, the 1.4 million, to us, they were not budgeted items that we were doing. So all this will go towards it. So we did the first reimbursement. So once that comes up, obviously that will feed into covering the cost for the next quarters that we're going through right now. And what we're doing is we did put a freeze in the budget, but we froze the budget only from the perspective of making sure that we weren't buying outside of what we need, because we have various different lines that we don't need right now because of what we're trying to do. So I don't want people to think we're not spending on things. From a perspective of a freeze, we are buying everything that we need, the PPEs, the signage, the commission of the air conditioning units, things like that. Everything that they need and the various school needs, all those expenditures are going through. We're just stepping back going, training and conferences not happening, so that's frozen. You know, unless there's online training that technology needs, Fran needs, anything that is immediate needs, it's going through. But everything else that was planned to travel and that's frozen, and we'll use those funds to pay for what we're doing right now until we get reimbursement. So as things are stopped, you know, obviously we're not going to have some field trips for the buses that we're going to need that would have been used for sports. So those funds are frozen, so we're going to use those funds now. So we'll have that catch up from a reimbursement standpoint. So we're going to use our budget first to the best we can on the items we don't need. And then down the road, if the need, and hopefully we can get back to whatever the new normal is, if at that point we don't have the funds, then we would go to the Board of Finance to say, we've done what we can with our budget, now we do need help because we've gone back into whatever the new normal is.
Okay.
Did I cover everything on?
No, you did. You did.
Okay.
I guess it's so hard, right? Because it's hard for you to guess how much we might end up with that we can't cover, right? I mean, that's like an impossible, but that's ultimately.
It is right now. I mean, based on what their guidelines are, we should get 75% of everything we got back, or everything that we've submitted. And we are submitting payroll. So out of the 245 that we've submitted, we've actually, in that number is 90,000 of payroll resources. So the extra cleaning we did at one point, we had a lot of overtime. It's, and it is overtime based. If you have normal working hours, and although you may be doing 100% of your day on COVID, it's not eligible because that's a normal budgeted day for you. It has to be outside the norm. So any of our overtime and things like that, we put that in plus a percentage of the fringe benefits, medical, dental, things like that, the taxes that the board pays. So we.
Right, but Ann, any personnel we hire unbudgeted because of COVID, they're working during their normal day, but that's a FEMA expense, right? That's an eligible expense?
Eligible because they were not budgeted.
Right, so the 7 custodians are probably spending all their time on COVID, but it's eligible for FEMA funds because they were not budgeted. But our normal staff, if Jose's spending all his time on COVID, he would have been working for us in a normal year. So his time, unless it's overtime, is not FEMA eligible. It's the additional staff. Okay.
Yep.
So Ann, are the campus supervisors eligible, that 441,000?
In new positions, yes. Anything that's new that we never, so if we had, say, you know, a full staff of 500 is our normal FTE count, but we went to 580, those 80 are unbudgeted for us, so we would submit for them for reimbursement because of what we're doing.
Got it. I was just confused when you said we're submitting. I think you said like 245,000, but the campus supervisors are 440,000.
Oh, no. What I've submitted to date is what we've actually expended out, payroll, things like that. I have to supply payroll records, invoices, things like that, copies of checks. So that's what we, to date. Then we'll do, September will be the bigger one, and hopefully, because that'll be the next quarter, we'll submit in October. Hopefully we'll have a letter within 2-3 weeks to know what they actually covered.
Got it.
Okay.
And Kevin,
Yeah,
going
so
back
the
to the
245 is just because there's only been one quarter that you could report.
got
Yeah,
it.
we had a small in the first quarter because of the couple of days in March, but yeah.
Right. The next one is the big one.
Yep.
And probably moving forward. Okay, thank you.
And have they shared reasons why they would not reimburse?
We get a letter, they will send us a letter to say, this is what we're reimbursing the 75%, and then they should be saying why they're not doing, we know 25% won't if they're covering, but if they're not covering something altogether, they'll explain why. But we have a dedicated representative of FEMA working with the state, and we're in contact with that person all the time as we've been putting our information in before we submit it. She actually reviews it to say, you know, that really isn't something, or do you have this? So we've been guided the whole way. So I'm hoping that what we've submitted, because it's been monitored as we're putting it in, it'll come down to when they actually look at all our invoices.
And do you know, is there an appeals process if we submit for something and it doesn't get reimbursed? Can we challenge that?
I actually don't know. I'll look into that. I'll ask. It was strange this year because the meeting we had, the Zoom meeting on this whole thing, and you have to set up a FEMA portal and you do it all electronic. It was all done through the state. So we had a state Zoom call with hundreds of finance directors and business managers on it, and the state was the one telling us what we needed to do with FEMA. So I'll go to them first and I'll find out and get back to you.
Thanks, Sam.
Yep.
All right, thanks. So can we now talk about the Middlebrook one specifically?
Sure. So that was we gave a kind of a brief overview about the world language teacher to have that world language teacher so we can manage class size and keep kids cohorted in 7.
Cohorted.
Right.
All right. Are there any board questions or comments about the world language thing, world language position?
May I just add one piece of information that I think might be helpful in as the board considers this? Would that be okay?
Oh, of course.
Okay. I didn't want to interrupt. I apologize. So I wanted to share that we recently had an opening for Spanish at the high school because we had an unexpected retirement. And so we've just gone through the search process for a similar position. World language is a shortage area across the state, so it's always difficult to find world language teachers on a good day. This time in the year, it's particularly difficult. And so based on the fact that the high school search was a very challenging one, and we have this position posted as an anticipated position because we proactively posted anticipated positions across subject areas and across levels, and we're not seeing qualified candidates for the position at this time, it's likely that if this were approved, we would need to assign overages if teachers at Middlebrook were interested in taking them as overages. And so doing that would eliminate the cost of insurance, which is about $25,000. So just something to keep in mind. All of these numbers are sort of the worst case scenario because they include the high end of insurance. We don't always have staff members that take the insurance because they may have a spouse or a family member under whose insurance they are. But in this case, it's looking like we would probably be looking to post overages instead of hiring a teacher that would be eligible for insurance. So just something to keep in mind as you consider.
And Maria, how would that affect the cohorts? Because I know one of the main reasons for hiring this, and I do remember last year it was so difficult to find someone who speaks both Spanish and French. But if you have an overage, so what that means just clarify this, if you have a teacher who's teaching 5 Spanish, now they're going to ask them to teach 6 Spanish. Does that mess up the cohort then?
Well, it wouldn't perfectly preserve the cohorts, no. There would still be some benefit from it, but it wouldn't perfectly, there would be some, crossing with the teachers going into different classrooms. So it's not the ideal situation, but again, with these positions that are in shortage areas, it's often very difficult to find qualified staff members. And because of the fact that we've just gone through a very similar search at the high school, we're anticipating that this might be difficult to fill. And so our best attempt here would be to probably go with something internal, provided the teachers were on
If
board.
it's something internal, you mean the cross cohort would be teacher crossing the cohort and
yes,
not
the teachers, exactly, right.
Okay.
Right.
Yes.
My understanding, I believe from Damien, I think it was in response to Jen's question, I read that as without the position, they may have to cross kids. And so you would then moving kids across cohorts in order to manage class sizes and fill the schedule, which is really what we're trying to avoid.
Right.
Oh, so it's not the teacher that would be moving around. It would be the kids that are
without the
without the position.
Yeah.
Well, but the position means either a new person or overage from another teacher, correct?
Right.
And not,
right.
Right. Okay. So it's the outlay from either one. It's the expense of one or the other.
Right.
Versus crossing would be with zero expense.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yeah. And they'd have to completely revise their schedule.
Okay.
And we'd have to hire them in 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think we're all pretty comfortable saying that this will most likely be an overage situation.
Most likely, provided that the teachers, that we have enough teachers to, accept the overage. Typically overages are appealing to teachers because it's an opportunity, for additional compensation. Obviously it's additional responsibility, but typically overages are things that teachers are interested in taking, but we can't assume that that's going to happen. We would just imagine that people might be interested in it. We've also
so this number
schedules to see if that would work.
This number is worst case scenario. If we hired an overage, would it be like 50% reduction, or what percentage?
It's about 25,000 less is my guess. And again, that's the high end.
That's the benefits. That's the benefits piece would not be needed.
That's right.
Okay.
One of your main concerns with this was that we'd have staff crossing teams, but you'd also have students crossing teams. Do you know how many students would actually be crossing teams? I mean, it's kind of a moot point, I guess, because you can't hire somebody, but do you have thoughts on that, or do you know?
I don't have that information in front of me. I'm sorry. No.
That's okay. Okay.
Okay. Unless there are any more comments or questions, could we have a motion and then a vote on this?
I make a motion that we approve the additional foreign language teacher for Middlebrook.
I'll second.
All right, thank you, Gretchen. Thank you, Glenn. Any more discussion? All right, all in favor of the 1.0 interim world language position at Middlebrook? Raise your hand, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that's approved. Thank you. The next one is 0.5 PE at Middlebrook. Again, up to a year. Kevin, you want to explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so as I wrote to you, the middle school has changed their approach to stride pretty substantially this year. And so again, no cross cohorting from one team to another as had been the traditional method. To manage the new schedule, health classes were switched from a quarterly class to a daily class that will now meet, I think, once every 6 days over the course of the entire year. In order to cover health in this fashion, they need to increase the FTE in health. The current health teacher teaches 2 teams. The new FTE would teach a 3rd team. Additionally, the new stride schedule reduced the number of PE classes from 90 to 60. And so in an effort to offset the reduction of PE meetings, the additional staff would also be used to offer some more PE instruction. And that would get students closer to having, a total of 70 PE classes rather than the projected 60. So, the ultimate goal again is to, keep kids from crossing, to cover the change in schedule, and then to address both the concerns in health and PE as a result of the change in the stride schedule. And it's common for us to hire dual certified staff that are certified in both health and PE.
So Kevin, the goal is to not cross cohorts, but I feel like we're already doing that, correct? Because of the situation with world language and the situation with other strides.
Well, they're not crossing out of their teams. That's been the way that they've built the entire schedule.
Okay. So this will keep people from doing that. And what if we end up having to go fully remote? And what happens to this specific, you know, if we're doing stride, if we're doing PE at home?
We'd still be our schedule. And so, you know, these teachers, both the world language teacher and the PE teacher here would still have responsibilities.
I'm sorry, I was muted. Any questions, comments, in addition to Mandy? Okay, is there a, I'm sorry, I can't hear.
Can you, Kevin, how do you guys get from the 90 to 60 to 70? Adding the extra teacher, like if we didn't add it, then what are we looking at?
So with the PE, it looks like, you know, I don't have all of the intricacies of the Middlebrook schedule. And so if, I'm not sure Brian has been around long enough to respond thoroughly since Damian Whelan has built the schedule, but I believe that teacher, you know, will be able to pick up some additional periods where kids could be scheduled into PE. And I'm not sure if that would be managed through their, what's generally through their, that flex period that kids have at the end of the day or built into their schedule. But I think that was the idea.
Okay. So if they're not doing this PE,
Right. So so again, just with it looks like with the way the schedule is currently constructed, in the absence of this 0.5 FTE, at least PE would be reduced to 60 meetings. Right. So the supplemental PE classes would be in lieu of tutorial time.
Kevin, that's even with best case scenario, kids being in school 4 days a week. I guess I'm just trying to wrap my head around this. If you only have half the kids in school 2 days a week, and then you have all, you know, you're only in school 4 days a week. I guess I'm trying to wrap my head around additional PE time when kids are in school less time live.
So I think what they're looking to do, you know, recognizing the reduction, students have those tutorial blocks in their schedule. So they're looking to supplement some of that tutorial time with physical education. And so, I mean, I think in terms of the broader question, in a hybrid model, I mean, some PE will be, you know, synchronous when you're in school, and some, you know, may wind up being asynchronous as well. And the stride schedule is on a 6-day cycle. So, you know, students would participate whether they're in person or at home.
If I could add that stride does take place on that totally remote day, Wednesday also. So there are, well, that's a modified schedule and modified class periods. The main impact would be to reduce the number of tutorials and provide the children with additional physical education in lieu of that.
Any more comments or questions before we entertain a motion? Okay, is there a motion?
I move to recommend the 0.5 additional PE health teacher for Middlebrook.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Glenn, I just saw you first, so
Okay.
thank you, though, Mandy, as well. Okay, all in favor of 0.5 PE at Middlebrook for 1 year?
Aye.
Raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye, aye, aye. Okay, any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, I'm really trying to look at everybody, so I'm assuming that that was unanimous. All right, thank you. The next is kindergarten at Miller Driscoll. Kevin, this was enrollment driven and you have done this.
I did.
Do you need board approval?
Well, it's after the fact, and I apologize for that. In all normal circumstances, I'd prefer to have you all vote to approve these positions, but this was one I needed to hire.
Sure. All right. Well, it's easy enough for us to at least take a motion. Obviously, I'm hoping we're going to approve it. This one's enrollment driven, and this traditionally, at least in my history with the board, enrollment driven needs are approved. So especially at the beginning of the year. So is there a motion to approve the kindergarten teacher?
So
moved.
Thanks, Glenn, and Mandy, thanks for seconding. All in favor, please raise your hand.
Aye.
Okay, any abstentions? Any objections? Any opposed? All right, I think that's unanimous as well. All right, moving on to the building subs.
Right. So what we're proposing with this request is that we hire 2 additional building subs per school. And really what we're driving at is trying to have some continuity in backfilling staff, because we're imagining in this COVID environment, as we're asking people to be far more cautious when they're not feeling well to come to school. We're anticipating we're going to have an increased number of staff absences. And so we're trying to set ourselves up so we can more effectively and with more continuity cover classes and cover those absences.
Well, that makes sense, Kevin. I mean, we know it's going to happen. We know that those absences are going to occur. And if you're going to have the same person there who knows the system, knows the students, knows the schedules, knows the operation, we're better off for that. I have no problem with this at all.
Right. And our building subs do participate in all our training.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It makes sense.
This is the one I don't have questions about. I want our teachers to stay home if they need to. I want them to feel comfortable staying home if they need to.
I agree.
Ditto.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the 8.0 additional building subs, 2 per school for 1 year if necessary? Glenn, all right. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Ruth, I saw your hand. I'm sorry. So, okay, so all in favor, please raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that's approved as well. Cafeteria aides at Middlebrook.
Right. So
2.0 for $7,854.
Yeah, the school is looking for additional adults to help supervise the lunch program. And, fundamentally what it comes down to is, again, in, normal circumstances, we would have, entire class of kids, a grade level of kids eating in the cafeteria, and they'd be supervised by a couple handfuls of staff. Now we're having students eat in classrooms. And so we're spread very, very thin from a supervisory perspective. And so they're looking for additional support to cover those supervision needs.
Okay.
Kevin, could this help with allergies? I mean, so are the supervisors going from classroom to classroom? I know the majority of lunches will be eaten in the classroom, correctly?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we'll have protocols in place already. Brian, do you want to speak to that? But if I understand your question, there'll just be, there'll be an adult presence while the teachers also take their own lunch.
So the teachers will leave the classroom for the lunch, and these supervisors will be in the classroom supervising the class during lunch.
That would be a common model to implement. This is a true distributed model for the lunchroom situation, where you, in normal times, would have the efficiency of gathering large numbers of children together and being able to supervise them with a very efficient ratio of adults. In this model, you have them distributed among all of the classrooms on the teams. And so we've been looking at ways to vary teacher lunch periods in order to have teachers available, stride teachers available. So it really is a all hands on deck supervisory issue, and
Got it.
this would be extremely helpful.
Right. I'd imagine they'd also be, as they're moving around, also monitoring, bathroom usage and the like as kids are using restrooms, and just, again, reinforcing all of those social distance norms that we need to have in place.
These would be full-time, full day
No.
availability, or is it just during the lunch, just during like the lunch periods to
Correct.
monitor? So it wouldn't include, let's say, like high school, like hallways, things like that. It's just the lunchtime, just the
About 2.5 hours a day.
2.5 hours a day.
Right. And this is just for Middlebrook.
For Middlebrook.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions, discussion? All right. Is there a motion to approve 2.0 cafeteria aids at Middlebrook for up to 1 year if needed?
So moved.
Thanks, Gretchen. Second?
Second.
Thanks, Glenn. All in favor, please raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, I think that was unanimous as well. All right, let's move on to the last item and the largest item. 7.0 campus supervisors at 3 at Cider Mill, 2 at Middlebrook, and 2 at Wilton High School.
Yes, that's correct. And again, this is also a supervisory position. And the rationale for these positions really is just that our principals, and I'll ask them to weigh in here in just a second, are imagining, and I think rightly so, that they're going to need significant additional coverage during lunch periods, at arrival, at dismissal, in the hallways while kids are using the bathroom, etc. Again, helping to reinforce all of those social distance norms and reinforcing the mitigation strategies. So these are, essentially extra hands, extra eyes, and extra ears to ensure the safety and well-being of our kids and staff while they're in schools. Why don't we have Jen go ahead and you can weigh in about Cider Mill.
Sure. Well, we need 3 additional monitors during the lunch period, just for the sheer amount of classrooms that need to be monitored. So for a good chunk of the day during the lunch waves, that would take on that role. Additionally, just the sheer amount of students, even with the hybrid model, coming into the building during arrival and dismissal to maintain the social distancing, even with the wonderful signage that we have. Yeah. We imagine that's going to be quite a challenge with the young learners that we have. So having that extra support out in the hallways, we're going to have all hands on deck for non-classroom teachers out in the hallway. But again, we have fairly large buildings, and so to make sure that we have the right number of people. We are going to use the campus supervisors during the time there's going to be those windows of time where it's not the lunch wave, where we'll have certain bathrooms to be monitored, where they can help students. The heavy traffic bathrooms don't have as many bathrooms in classrooms the way Miller Driscoll does. So all of our bathrooms are external in the hallways. And so monitoring these bathrooms are going to be quite a challenge. So any extra pairs of hands are going to be very welcome. So that's the primary roles. It's going to be really social distancing and just helping our learners with the expectations in this new reality.
Jen, the 3 is because of the 3-house structure at Cider Mill.
The 3 came because I need the 3 bodies for the lunch waves, because I literally don't have adult supervision for 3 of my classrooms. So I think Kevin was trying to be creative and trying to get me a little more support. Kevin, I guess you could speak to that. Trying to, I need more support. And so I think he was trying to take the lunchtime need that I had and trying to extend that and to turn them that
Okay, hey,
more into
you know best what you need. We
Yeah.
don't. And we have to trust you that you guys have always been very, very conscious of cost, expense, needs, and I trust each and every one of you that
Thank you.
I believe firmly that if you didn't need it, you wouldn't ask for it.
Thank you.
So, yeah, and it goes for all of you. I mean, every one of you. Okay.
Thank you.
Jen, I totally agree with Glenn, but the $441,000 as a taxpayer, it's a big amount to swallow. So is this not something that we could offer as an overage? It's the insurance that's killing me. Could we not offer this as an overage to teachers who are already there to reduce? Is there any other option?
I do have some.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. I do have some thoughts about that. We've been thinking a lot about how we can be really careful with the costs with all of these positions. And as we've shared throughout this process, all of these numbers are really at the high end. They're sort of the worst case scenario. One of the things that we committed to doing since our last board meeting is having some of these positions in place up until December, at which point we would reevaluate and then determine whether we needed them beyond that. So we can think first of all about maybe looking at really half of the cost to start, committing to that. And then, to try to be more cost conscious, we've also thought about a couple of other things. Initially, we considered whether we might be able to hire substitutes for this sort of thing. But the issue with that is that this is bargaining unit work. And so the bargaining unit is entitled to that, and it would be subject to bargaining if we tried to remove it from the bargaining unit. So one of the things that I've approached the union about is to consider these positions as temporary with a very narrow focus. These are campus supervisors that we're hiring specifically for protocols related to COVID-19. And so while we may be using them in a variety of areas within the building and on campus, we're going to have a very set number of responsibilities for them. And perhaps we can negotiate a lower rate through some bargaining with the union. And I'm in the process of doing that at this time. I've approached them about it. And so we're hoping that we can come to an agreement about that. So the number that you see, I think, is the very high end. We're hoping to, again, just commit to until December so that we can monitor where we are. And then I think the best case scenario would be if we could negotiate a lower hourly rate for the employees because we're going to narrow the responsibilities.
So could we perhaps vote on a smaller rate tonight and then come back? And I'd almost feel more comfortable, and I don't know the logistics around this, but to say, let's start with 1 or 2, and if we need more, I just, listen, we're all hopeful that we're back in school full time. Just the idea of paying someone a structured rate, that's a contracted rate for a year, and including healthcare, and then if we are out of school, does that rate go away? It's a lot to take in.
I think it might be helpful rather than voting on a specific rate, because there is a range and I wouldn't want to lock us in terms of our negotiations with the union, that if the board feels comfortable agreeing to a set amount, we've laid out for you that amount for the year, the $441,000. If the board felt comfortable agreeing to, a different amount, and then we could try to work within those parameters. That might give us more flexibility from a hiring standpoint and from a negotiation standpoint with the union as well.
And the job responsibilities, could you just confirm the job? So you're basically, and I don't have a better technical term for it, but you're wandering the school just advising of any issues.
Well, you're, as Jen said, you're really helping to enforce protocols with social distancing, mask wearing, safety on campus, outside, as students are outside, perhaps eating lunch in some open areas, particularly at the high school level. So we would really identify a set number of responsibilities that are focused primarily on these protocols, and we would assign those to this group of staff members that we would be hiring.
I heard arrival and dismissal times. The bathrooms, I don't know how many bathrooms are at the high school. I'm not sure I can count that high. And then the lunch waves as being primary. And then, Bob, maybe you can talk to us a little bit more about the high school needs. There are certain areas where students may wish to congregate, and whether that's a good or a bad idea. I'm assuming that some of the supervision goes there.
Yeah, I'd be glad to. Firstly, I would preface my comments by saying that the request for 2 at the high school is a very modest request. We are, as Mr. Hemley said, very diligent and conscientious of cost. But some of the highlighted areas of the high school, drop off and pick up will be a critical area. And, you know, I think we need to be cognizant that we're talking about health and safety here. So envision already some additional supervision, ensuring that students are socially distanced, that they are even sanitizing their hands upon arrival, that our re-entry protocol into the building is supervised and enforced, and we really get that culture we're trying to create. We envision multiple lunch locations. We are not having the students eat in the classrooms at the high school. So if you envision some students eating in the cafeteria while safely socially distanced, some probably in the field house, some in the event we secure the tents in the back of the building, but also the outdoor area in back of the building. We're going to open up the area down the front alley between the A wing and the D wing. Students will need to be able to get out and get some fresh air and get some mask breaks. So that's going to be important. Already in the hallways, just hallway protocols, you know, walk to the right, social distancing. You know, high school students, they just tend to want to gravitate together. They're not wired to be 6 feet apart, and we just want to really, really keep them safe. The idea that we have these bathrooms, actually, as Debbie said, that's on my list, you know, just ensuring certainly during passing times that even with the signage that we have some supervision and enforcement of these areas, so that we're just making sure that we have ample supervision. And then, you know, depending on how long this lasts, which none of us can predict, my vision would be that, you know, I already talked about all these aforementioned outdoor areas. We also have, as you know, 3 floors, very expansive floors of high school, a lot of square footage. My vision is to have 2 campus supervisors per floor that we can deploy as needed to make sure that, again, we're just keeping kids safe. We cut campus supervisors historically at the high school, and we've been getting by with the number that we have, but under these circumstances, the request for 2 additional ones right now within the parameters Maria mentioned is a very modest request, and we need them.
Yeah. Kevin, these costs outside of the kindergarten teacher, which is enrollment driven, all these other costs are directly COVID related costs that were unbudgeted and are submissible for reimbursement, correct?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, so we're looking at, hopefully, and there's no reason for them not to reimburse 75% of this cost.
I know, but Glenn, as a taxpayer, it's coming from something. I mean,
I'm confused. I don't know.
In an ideal world, yes, this would 75% would be reimbursed by FEMA and 25% would be reimbursed by the state. But if it's not, coming back to us to make additional cuts within our budget, or to pull the money from somewhere, or to then go to the town and ask them to give us the money to pay for it, which then comes back to the taxpayers paying for it.
So our concern is it's the worst case scenario, basically, Glenn. There's no guarantee that we're going to get the 75% back.
Right.
So these supervisors cannot, we're talking about the high school bathrooms where congregating, but they cannot go into the bathrooms, correct?
Well, actually, right now, under these circumstances where we will have 2 people in the bathroom at a time, I don't envision that happening. Historically, in an effort to monitor bathrooms for vaping, they have done so. But picture a high school with 650 students passing at the same time. And I know that's half the students we generally would have, but it's still 650 students. And monitoring, as Debbie said, the numerous bathrooms, meaning just the traffic flow and the entry. That's only one thing on the list. I mean, I listed all those other things and I could keep going. You know, they do a lot. Even entry and pickup is critical, and the supervision of high school students in hallways to ensure that we're keeping them safe and distanced under these circumstances. I think we're talking about the health and safety of our kids.
Is
And I'm not-
is the 440 the worst case scenario for a full year?
Yes.
Or
Yes.
because it said December through the full year?
Yeah, the 440 represents a fully loaded cost for a full year. And so,
Okay.
you know, I think it's important, you know, like I said to start, and I as a taxpayer, I hear the cost.
We all are.
If you are. And so trying to weigh the cost benefit here, like with so many other decisions, there are benefits and drawbacks to everything we do. We think this is the approach. And, you know, I would just say, feel strongly that it wasn't essential to take operations. We wouldn't even be having the conversation. With respect to the total cost, I do, you know, we'll just commit to what Maria had already stated, is that number one, work to negotiate a reduced cost with the UPSU union and to try to drive down the per person cost. But also we'll continue to actively monitor. And so, you know, it may be a case where even if we're full in person, you know, our students have the routine down and we may feel more comfortable with the supervision needs and we can let go of them. Or in a remote situation where we won't need them, you know, or some other conditions may shift that would reduce the need, and we would make the change as responsively as we could.
So if we go remote, are we?
Is there any way of hiring them on a 3-month at a time kind of basis, so we don't get perhaps you know wrapped up in a longer expectation that might, you know, commit us to a time where we don't need them?
So that's what we'd like.
I don't know the ins and outs. Can you say, you know, we'll hire you until December and then we'll look and renew it till March, or, you know, whatever, take it on a sort of 3-month basis or whatever works?
That's what we're looking to negotiate with the union. This is not a union where historically we've had temporary positions the way that we have with our custodial unit. But that is something that we're looking to negotiate with the union, and provided that, you know, they agree, that is something that we would post in that way. I will say the drawback sometimes to doing that is that you're less likely to find people who will commit to really short-term positions. And that's why I think a 3 to 4 month period is sort of the minimum. Even from an efficiency standpoint of going through the hiring and onboarding and training process, you don't want to have a revolving door necessarily of people who are, you know, on for a month and then off. But, you know, I think that's definitely something that we're looking to pursue, considering perhaps a 3 to 4 month period. You know, we thought December would be a good time to monitor it again.
I mean, given the environment and just, I think, how important it is to try to keep the kids in school and keep them as safe as possible and as healthy as possible. In my mind, I feel that the administration is taking the right steps to acknowledge the negotiations that need to be had and the parameters and the costs and benefits of doing short-term versus longer-term contracts, and kind of covering us in that respect, and knowing that it's reimbursable. While it's not the most, you know, pleasant part of being a board member, I you know, would move to go ahead and approve it.
I have some questions.
Yeah, Jen, go ahead.
All right, a couple things. First, is this an issue with the union because we are?
I said, Jen, we lost you for a minute.
We can't hear you, Jen.
Jen, we can't hear you.
You should hear me. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. A little bit.
Like a game. Can you hear me now? Are we feeling the union because of this, because we already have campus supervisors at the high school? I mean, we're creating this position at other schools, so why do we have to go through the union for it?
It's a position that exists in the bargaining unit. It's not specific to a school. So the position is a bargaining unit position. And we actually have campus supervisors at both Middlebrook and the high school. But the way that it works is that it's not based on the building, it's based on what's in the contract, and the contract applies to the entire district. So because the position exists, we have to honor the position as a bargaining unit position, and they're entitled to that work.
Okay. I'm not, are they going to be, we time and time hear the word unprecedented, unprecedented, unprecedented. Are they going to be reasonable in, do you get a sense that they're going to help us here or not?
You know, I think that I will say my experience having worked in this district for this is my 22nd year here. All of our bargaining units are very reasonable, and I think that they are very committed to the students first and foremost, and they're committed to doing what's right and fair. And while I think it would be unfair to assume what the outcome is going to be, I would say that our experience historically has always been very good. So I can only expect that it will be an amicable negotiation. I can't tell you what the outcome will be, but I find that unit to be reasonable the way that all of our units are.
Okay. So my next question is, we're asking for positions at all three schools except for, with the exception of Miller Driscoll. Not that I'm asking to add, but I'm wondering why we're not asking for positions at Miller Driscoll.
Right. I think their situation's a little different. As Jen noted, a number of the classrooms have bathrooms in the classroom.
Right.
I think supervision needs are different. Their playgrounds were covered as far as I know. And they just didn't have the same level of need. Kathy is on, so she can speak to that. But these other schools very much had the need, the way the kids are moving through the buildings.
Okay. Kathy, it's okay. That's good. My next question is there any way, and I know I'd asked this question previously about volunteers, can we pay somebody to manage a group of volunteers to look into our schools, or are we not even allowed to do that because this is a collective bargaining? Like, can we create a position that's not considered a campus supervisor?
I think it's, you know, I think that's a complex question to answer. And we can certainly, you know, we've taken the position, and I've taken the position because I think it's the right one to start, that we really need to limit access to our buildings to volunteers, even recognizing how valuable volunteers are. So kind of just on the volunteer side, while they serve, you know, kind of many good functions, we do typically run into issues of continuity. And so that becomes a challenge. With respect to creating a new position, I think I go back to, and you know, Maria can certainly weigh in here, but I think I go back to the nature of the work that is being requested. If it's comparable to bargaining unit work, then I think it's bargaining unit work. And so then we would, you know, we would face a challenge from the union because of that. But Maria, if I've got that wrong, please say so.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, I think and we've gotten guidance on these kinds of issues in the past from our attorneys, and that's really the guidance, is that if it looks and smells like bargaining unit work, it is. And so we have to be very careful that we're not giving it to others, particularly in a situation if there's pay involved. The other thing that I'll say with the volunteers is I think, you know, we have to be very careful because we're instituting protocols that we're expecting employees to follow. And when you have people that are non-employees and expecting them to follow those protocols, it's much more difficult to enforce. Also, while we've had a wonderful history of having volunteers in the schools, I think we've also experienced the challenges with being able to ensure that volunteers are on site every day in the same way that you can ensure that employees are. Sometimes it can be a little bit less reliable to expect that volunteers are going to be able to commit to volunteer work in the same way that employees commit to you know, the work that they've been hired for. I think also just from a practical standpoint and thinking about, you know, parents who work for us, oftentimes these volunteers are parents. And, you know, this is not going to be a highly desirable role for many people because they're going to be enforcing rules that some students may not want to follow. And I don't know that parents are necessarily going to want to be in that position where they're trying to enforce things. That, you know, we hear parents that we hire as substitutes that say, I'm not allowed to be in my child's building because, you know, my child doesn't want to see me. Typically that happens with the secondary level. You know, at the elementary level, the kids love seeing their parents there. But I think it creates an odd dynamic to have a parent or a volunteer in a role where they're enforcing school rules and protocols. And I think also from a child standpoint, if there's a different level of respect sometimes that employees get because they know that they're associated with the schools in a different way than volunteers are. So sometimes the directives have a little bit more teeth than they would necessarily from a volunteer. So those are some of the reasons that I think it may be problematic to try to have volunteers in to fill these roles. Although I think, you know, we are always trying to exhaust all options, and I think it's certainly worth considering. But, you know, we've had a number of discussions about volunteers in serving in other capacities. And for all of those reasons, we've decided to hold off on that.
Okay, and my question, which I think, you know, has been answered by people's descriptions, is the number requested does not seem, in other words, it's what you need. It's not a number that could go down. You know, I was hoping for that, but given the descriptions, unless somebody wants to say, sure, you know, we could do with one fewer or two fewer, it seems that that road is not something I'm going to get a positive answer on, so never mind. All right, so are there other questions or comments? I think we kind of need to perhaps get this issue resolved unless there are new comments or questions. Okay, is there a motion to approve 7.0 campus supervisors for up to 1 year if needed, with the understanding that the district will work to make that high-end cost not be the reality? It will be less than that.
Deb, can we actually do a motion to have a lower number?
We can. But again, it's, I guess I mean, sure, we can do that. I've heard them say that they're going to work towards a lower number. And I would, if it bumps into how many people they can hire, that would be my kind of worry about that. You know, if it means they can only hire 5, then I don't want to go there because I've already, you know, heard the answer of we need 7. So Maria, you know, help us out here.
Well, again, I think you have my commitment that I will do everything that I can to work with the union to try to negotiate a lower rate. You know, we will definitely monitor the positions very carefully throughout the year. We will make the commitment, you know, through December and then revisit whether we'll continue for the second half of the year. And you know, we'll take whatever the board is willing to approve. I think the principals have made a strong argument for the need for these staff members. And I just think we have to keep coming back to health and safety as being priorities. And I think the other piece that, you know, maybe we haven't talked about as explicitly is that there is concern among the staff about who is going to be ensuring that students are following these protocols. And it's going to take everyone's efforts to ensure that students are following the protocols, but we can't do it alone. And we do need staff that are really designated to focus on these things solely throughout the day. And I think not having the staff to do that is going to put just going to place additional stress on the teachers and the other staff who already have so many other responsibilities throughout the course of the day. You know, we're all working on these things together, but we need the additional support of the campus supervisors to help with it. So
the only thing that I'll say is I can't support this because personally, I feel like the kids are going to spend the majority of their time at their desks. There's going to be half the amount of students in at the same time. Yes, there's children going to the bathroom and stuff, but to spend $440,000 on 7 full-time staff with healthcare to monitor the student, and of course, health and safety is paramount. It's first. I'm a parent. There's nothing more important. Just to me, it sounds like, you know, the students can't be at the lockers. There's not a lot of congregating. It just seems like a large amount of money with full benefits to have someone who is monitoring our schools. That's just how I feel.
I feel that I actually feel that there's going to be a lot of congregating in the high school and in Middlebrook because that's the nature of those kids. I don't see it as much in Cider Mill, except that I do think that the enforcement of masks and 6 foot, social distancing is probably going to be more important. But I feel more strongly about it for Middlebrook and the high school. So I do think that we're going to need to put something forward, mostly and primarily because of the health and safety. Because I think that's who's going to make sure that all of this is going to happen. I mean, it's exactly why we're probably, we're putting all the high school kids in the hybrid possibly going forward, because it's going to be really difficult to control the social distancing and them wearing masks between classes. And I think that's where I see that role coming up.
I see what I hear it. I hear what everybody's saying, and I understand that. I tend to agree more with Mandy, only because it's a huge amount of money. We also can't control any of these people outside of school. And while we as a school should do the best we can, it's a huge amount of money for us to try to come up with if it's not covered, when we can't control what anybody does anywhere else. I mean, I guess I'd either rather lower the number, or I'd rather see if we can handle stuff initially and then revisit it.
So
I agree with Jen.
Have the opposing view to some extent, in that just because we can't control what goes on outside of the school almost makes it more important to try to make sure that protocols are followed while kids are in school, because more risk is just more risk. It's not, one doesn't, beg or the other. So just because you do one thing that's risky doesn't mean that you should do another thing that's risky. I think that laying the foundation of the protocols in the very beginning, and making some of these practices more habitual through, extra enforcement capabilities and monitoring capabilities, my hope will help install kind of new habits that perhaps may lead to a lesser need down, the road, given, in the winter or what may happen. But I just don't see, without the extra bodies, the ability to manage the daily operations. And while I get that we might not fully get reimbursed for it, I think when it comes to trying to keep the kids in school and keep the staff in school and keeping everyone as healthy and safe as possible, it's a risk that I think is, meaningful and I think appropriate.
Okay, so let me ask Maria one more time. We appreciate the fact that you've given us kind of like the worst case scenario on everything.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think would be, I don't want to say best case, I don't want to say that, but what do you think is a realistic number? Where like, oh my gosh, I don't want to surprise them, I'm going to put in the worst case, but in reality, I think I could do it for, is there an X there that we can fill in that blank?
Well, I'd want to take some time to run those numbers because, Anne, I know that you ran the cost. I'd want to be able to just talk to Anne about what was involved in the insurance. Anne, was that with $25,000 per person for insurance?
It'd be close to that. Plus then you have any other taxes and things that would be along with that too.
Right.
Is there a way we can vote on this for the period between the beginning of school to December 31st and then readdress this come November after we've had some time to see how all that's worked out? And that would reduce that number? Or are you needing to hire these people? I mean, I know we've brought this up a few times in this conversation that they could be hired temporarily through December.
Mhm.
So
Right. And I think I asked that question earlier. Part of it is what kind of, if somebody is just going to feel like every 3 months, it's just like, what's the labor pool for that?
Okay.
So that's the risk there, even though they have to know that the job could be temporary and the hours could be different.
Right. If I might, another way is I'm just listening to the conversation unfold, and I certainly hear very clearly the concerns about the cost as well as the utility. And so it might be helpful, even if you think about it school by school, and it would be my very, very strong recommendation that we approve, or you approve rather, the campus supervisors for at least the high school in Middlebrook. And then Cider Mill, while I think there are appropriate and legitimate supervisory needs from the start to the end of the day in that school, the critical need is at the lunch and recess hour. And so an alternate recommendation might be to approve the campus supervisor for the high school and middle school, stay the 3 at Cider Mill, but we would need to go forward and minimally find 3 bodies to cover the lunch and recess needs. And then we'll have to figure out the other supervision responsibilities on the bookends of the day.
I would feel comfortable with that.
Kevin, what happened to our lunch aides that were at Cider Mill last year?
We have them, we just need more.
Okay.
And Kevin, what about the campus supervisors? You said we had 1 at the high school currently and 1 at Middlebrook currently.
There are several at each.
And
yeah, go ahead.
What are their roles during this?
Yeah, I mean, this is, they provide supervision. This is exactly what they do. They're in the cafeterias, they're in the hallways, they're out at the recess, they're at arrival and dismissal. They're through.
But so how many do we currently have at each school?
I believe, Maria, just help me if I don't have these numbers. I think it's 2 at Middlebrook, and Bob, is it 3 at the high school?
4 at the high school.
4 at the high school.
So we're actually, this request is for a total of 6 at the high school and a total of 4 at Middlebrook.
Correct.
And at Middlebrook, it's a partial, so I actually believe it's like a 1.3 at Middlebrook. There are 2 people, but one is split as a campus supervisor and a paraprofessional in the special education classrooms.
And I hate to even ask this question, but I just thought about it. For the overage, Maria, that's still an option. And what about, I'm just going to throw this out there, if we don't have, say, football, the coaches, to give people options who are already in our school system to make more money, where are we on that?
So it's different. I think it's definitely a fair question. Of course, we have to explore all possibilities. But when you have teachers who are exempt employees in terms of their work week, you don't get into things like paying overtime. But when you have non-exempt employees who are like our classified staff, who are hourly employees, they are subject to overtime. So as soon as we have a full-time staff member and then we're increasing that person, we have to pay the person overtime legally. The other piece is most of our people already are full-time, and so there's not time in their day to take on additional responsibilities when we need them. And we have very few part-time people across the district who could assume these additional responsibilities. So there are a number of reasons that we wouldn't, while it works for teachers, it doesn't work for non-certified staff.
Okay, I'm looking at the time as well, and I'm taking seriously, everybody's concerns, which we all share. And Kevin's revised recommendation to move forward with Wilton High School and Middlebrook, and then come back, and we do meet again next week and revisit Cider Mill. So I'm just going to sort of propose that we do a 2-step process, Middlebrook and the high school consider, and then Cider Mill redesign and reconsider next week. So I guess what I don't know, unless everybody has a serious, objection with that, I think we need to make some decision tonight. So is there a motion for approving Middlebrook Campus Supervisor 2.0 and Wilton High School 2.0? Up to 1 year, if needed, temporary, doing the best they can to contain the costs.
So moved.
All right, thank you. Mandy, is there a second?
Second.
Glenn. All right, all in favor, please raise your hand, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Anybody opposed? Okay, I just want to make sure. So we all approve that, am I right? I'm sorry, if somebody, I mean, my internet's not going great, so people are in slow motion.
I think we're good. We're all good.
We're all good, that's all I need to hear, thank you. All right, so, and that's not to diminish the needs at Cider Mill, but let's see if we can redesign and reconsider a little bit and just come back with a different constellation somehow. All right, so thanks everybody. Wonderful points and very thoughtful, and I'm glad we came to action on that. And thank you, Kevin, for your thoughtfulness as well. All right, so I have so many notes on the staffing page. I got to go find the agenda. All right, so our meeting next Thursday, we're going to plan that, I think puts us on our regular meeting schedule. We will plan that it will be in person based on logistics. We really want Kevin and his staff first to concentrate on the kids and the classrooms and getting ready. And if there is time to set the board up and to allow public access and to do all the things right. And when I say public access, my guess is it will not be on-site public access, even though we would be in person. We may not have the capability of public on-site access, so we have to figure out how to do that. Okay, anyway, but the date's there. Comments from the public. Lucille.
Yes, there is a comment from the public. Dear Wilton Board of Education members, the district's planned safety measures are not yet in place for teachers, and we are not confident that they will be in place for the return of students. The WEA is concerned about the lack of progress that has been made regarding the scheduled opening of school for students on August 26th. The Wilton School District is not ready to open. The staff has not been trained effectively in the myriad of forms of technology needed to support the hybrid model. This is unacceptable for the students and the staff of the Wilton Public Schools. It is our belief that the start of school needs to be altered. We are proposing a twofold solution to make the start of the school year safer for students and teachers. This would allow the schools to open more safely and effectively. 1, the WEA proposes a full remote start to the school year for a period of 3 weeks ending on September 18th. Prior to the end of that date, an evaluation can be performed as to whether we can transition back to a hybrid model. Number 2, the district has decided to implement a change in learning management systems from Google Classroom to Schoology, which is proving to be a significant and challenging transition for teachers. In order to give teachers more time to prepare for education at the start of school, we propose that August 26th and 28th be strictly teacher workdays and that students plan to remain at home. It is our sincere hope that these proposals will contribute to a smoother start to the school year. Sincerely, Andrew Nixagi, WEA President, on behalf of the WEA Reentry Committee.
Okay, thank you. And again, while we don't respond directly, we do listen intently and seriously, so thank you. Are there other public comments?
No, there are not.
Okay. All right, we have finished the agenda. It is 9:26, and so I am adjourning. So good night, everybody, and thank you. It's been quite a meeting, but thank you for everyone's hard work and all the behind-the-scenes hard work. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank
Good
you.
night,
Good
everyone.
night. Good night.
Good night.
Thanks. Good night.